But first, another set of classified documents have been found in Biden's home in Delaware. This now makes 20 documents that have been found so far. Joining us now this morning is reporter for Daily Caller and host of The Facts, Brianna Lyman, and Project 21 National Advisory Board member and radio host Christopher Arps. Happy Monday to you. Usually Mondays are kind of slow. Not a lot happens over the weekend, but very different here. A lot going on. Brianna, on Saturday, we found out that more documents were found in the Biden's home in Delaware. Now this is 20. So just to lay out the timeline here, they found documents in November and then in December, and now 2 sets of documents in January. How do you see this playing out?
Well, first of all, I think the most concerning thing that obviously you've mentioned before is the fact that it waited 2+ months to inform the American public that in November 2nd, the Department of Justice, Merrick Garland, the Biden administration thought it was in your best interest to hide that information from you. Now, originally, what I was concerned about was the fact that on Tuesday, we saw the weaponization of the federal government committee. And on my head, I kept saying, you know what? They want to delegitimize anything that comes out of that committee. So they have to throw a bone to Democrats and say, look, we go after Democrats just the same as we do Republicans. But now I'm also wondering, I think this is a great thing for Donald Trump. I think the DOJ wants to back away from prosecuting Donald Trump. And in order to do so, they have to not go after President Biden. Because if they don't go after Biden and they do go after Trump, then it points out to what conservatives have been saying all along, which is that conservatives are targeted. But if they go after Biden and they say, OK, we got nothing here, they're going to do the same to Donald Trump, let him off the hook because they bit too much. They bit off more than they can chew.
But on Thursday, according to the White House press secretary, the search had been complete. Yet on Saturday, as Allison pointed out, we learned of this new set of classified documents being found. Chris, where is the so-called transparency that the White House keeps talking about?
Well, I think we're going to see a continual drip of documents. I don't think this is the end of it. I also believe that Joe Biden and his presidency is in great peril right now. I think it is very curious to me that with a House panel coming up that's going to investigate Joe Biden, I find it very curious that we have these documents that were disclosed right before this investigation. And I'm wondering, with the appointment of a special counsel, will that special counsel probe be expanded into the Hunter Biden documents in accordance with this House panel that Jim Jordan is going to be conducting coming up soon?
Yeah, a lot of questions out there. Brianna, it's been reported that President Biden was heavily considering another run in 2024. But how much does this damage his chances at the White House again? Because if you looked back a couple of weeks ago, right, we had infighting going on in the House trying to elect a speaker. We had President Biden who finally went to the border. So he had a lot to run on. But now we have all of this coming out about these classified documents.
Well, for Democrats, because they usually have no standards, I don't necessarily think this is going to be the thing that affects their vote. But I do think, if you just look at the conglomerate of issues that President Biden has faced, inflation, the border crisis has obviously surged. We've seen fentanyl come over the border at a high price, Ukraine issues, and then this on top. This is just the cherry on top. But I do think that Democrats want to say that this is the reason that they need to put a more younger Democrat. And we've obviously heard talks of Gavin Newsom, Pete Buttigieg. So I do think that there is a possibility that they're going to use this to say he's not a good candidate.
And Kentucky Congressman and House Oversight Chair James Comer says the biggest concern for House Republicans is seeing the way former President Trump was treated over his handling of classified documents versus President Biden. And interestingly, if you watch many of the mainstream media, especially as I know many of us do on the weekends, they were saying it's completely different. It's apples and oranges, implying that Trump did something wrong, whereas Biden just, made a little mistake. Take a listen to this.
My concern is how there's such a discrepancy in how former President Trump was treated by raiding Mar-a-Lago, by getting the security cameras, by taking pictures of documents on the floor, by going through Melania's closet, versus Joe Biden. They're like, okay, your personal lawyers who don't have security clearance, they can go through, they can just keep looking and determine whatever's there. That's not equal treatment.
Chris, what do you make of this?
Yeah, I think the big glaring difference between Joe Biden's document caper and President Trump is President Trump was president of the United States. Joe Biden was vice president. And I want to know, why was the vice president of the United States hoarding documents at his private residence and at his think tank. And I want to know, do those documents in any way have anything to do with Hunter Biden's laptop, with his Chinese and Ukrainian business deals, and with the $50 million that was given to the University of Pennsylvania for this Biden Center? I think that's a huge question. Why did the Vice President of the United States have classified documents at his home? Former vice president.
No, that's a great point. President versus vice president, two very, very different roles. Allison, I do want to ask you a question here as a PR expert. We're starting to see the media hold President Biden accountable a little bit.
A little bit,
Yeah. For example, check out this headline from Bloomberg. Says Biden's missteps on secret papers create self-inflicted crisis. Now, do you think we're going to start seeing more of a shift of how the media is treating President Biden, meaning holding him more accountable as they did for former President Trump? Or do you think we're going to see much more of a, he made a mistake, he turned it in, he did everything right, it's not a big deal?
You know, we're starting to see a little bit of a shift. Katrina, over the weekend I was watching a lot of the Sunday shows trying to see how would these journalists react and how would they cover the story. So Jake Tapper and CNN asked some legitimate questions. Also ABC John Carl also, pointed out Biden and the administration's lack of transparency. So you mentioned that Bloomberg headline. We're starting to see it. Even if you were in the press room and watched some of the press conferences on Thursday and Friday, it wasn't just Newsmax who was asking the press secretary tough questions. It was other media outlets. So I'm happy to see that these questions are being asked. However, I'll be interested to watch The View today because they always have an interesting point and take on things. So there are some media outlets
that are
going to continue to say this is very different from President Trump to President Biden. But look, we'll see how it plays out. But I am happy to at least see the media is asking questions that we've been asking for a long time.
Sure. No, that's a great point. And Brianna, want to get a question from you here. It's reported that Hunter Biden lived in that Wilmington, Delaware home of his parents from 2017 to 2019. There were documents where he actually claimed that he was the owner. And Congressman James Comer is calling on the White House to now provide a visitor log of that Delaware home. How concerning do you think this could be for President Biden legally when it comes to who had access to the documents that he claims he was completely surprised to have been found? Brianna.
None at all, because his documents were locked up with his Corvette, so they were very, very safe. But I don't even think that Biden's documents that were found in his house is the most concerning. I think it's the fact that the think tank, which is funded by China, that's really concerning to me, that they shill all this money to that think tank. Biden leaves documents there. Were those documents there left on purpose? What did those documents have, and who had access to those documents? If you're funding something, you usually have access to these places. And when it comes to Hunter Biden, I don't think it's going to matter much to the media, because we've seen just a trove of information on that laptop that was incriminating enough and that was concerning, right? 10% for the big guy. And they did nothing to act on that, Democrats. So I don't necessarily think they'll act on here, and Republicans will once again hold someone's feet to the fire. And I don't think anything will necessarily come out of that.
Yeah, we'll see. Hunter Biden was at that Delaware home from 2017 to 2019. So the big question, as you both mentioned, who had access to those documents? All right. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you at the top of the hour. Great discussion to start off our Monday.